David's Gambit. The Firefly wasn't much to look at. At just 15 meters long, it was barely larger than an old Earth shipping container, its obsidian hull seeming to drink in the starlight rather than reflect it. Commander Sarah Chen liked it that way. The less attention her ship drew, the better. Status report, ARIA. Sarah called out to the ship's AI as she performed her pre-patrol checklist. The holographic display wrapped around her single-person cockpit, creating the illusion that she was floating in space. All systems nominal. Commander, ARIA responded, her voice carrying the slight synthetic lilt that Sarah had never quite gotten used to. Quantum compression drive at 99.8% efficiency. Adaptive defense grid online. Stealth systems active. Sarah nodded, her fingers dancing across the neural-linked controls. The Firefly might be small, but it represented humanity's greatest technological achievement. The culmination of decades of research into quantum mechanics and AI integration. They'd finally cracked the code. Instead of building bigger ships, they'd found a way to compress space itself. Beginning patrol route Delta 7, Sarah announced, more for the log than for ARIA's benefit. The Firefly's engines hummed to life, a barely perceptible vibration through the hull as they accelerated to cruising speed. Their mission was simple: patrol the outer colonies, maintain a presence, and ensure humanity's borders remained secure. The first 3 hours passed without incident. Sarah used the time to fine-tune the ship's quantum field harmonics, a task that required both concentration and intuition. The Firefly's revolutionary drive system allowed it to manipulate local space-time, compressing vast amounts of energy and matter into its diminutive frame. In theory, the ship carried the firepower of a traditional destroyer, all packed into a vessel smaller than most civilian shuttles. Commander, ARIA's voice cut through Sarah's focus. Multiple contacts detected at the edge of sensor range. Configuration unknown. Sarah straightened in her chair, calling up the tactical display. Show me. The holographic field shifted, revealing a cluster of massive signatures approaching from the direction of the Carina Nebula. As the sensor data refined, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. These weren't the usual merchant vessels, or even the occasional pirate raiders. These were warships, massive ones. ARIA, full spectral analysis. Processing. The AI responded. Vessels appear to be of unified design. Energy signatures suggest advanced antimatter propulsion systems, detecting multiple weapon emplacements and heavy shielding. Largest vessel measures approximately 3 kilometers in length. Sarah's mind raced. No known species in this sector possessed ships of that size. This was first contact, and judging by the formation and armament of the approaching fleet, not a peaceful one. How many? 27 capital ships detected, accompanied by approximately 100 smaller vessels. Based on energy output and configuration, I estimate this represents a significant invasion force. Sarah's hands tightened on her controls. The nearest human colony was less than a light-year away, with minimal defenses. Even if she sent a warning now, the defense fleet wouldn't arrive in time. The Firefly was all that stood between these unknown aggressors and thousands of innocent civilians. ARIA, prepare to broadcast on all frequencies. Let's see if they're interested in talking before things get messy. Before she could transmit, her display lit up with an incoming communication. The alien fleet had noticed them. The holographic field shimmered, and Sarah found herself face to face with something distinctly non-human. The creature had iridescent scales covering what appeared to be a reptilian face, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and multiple arms folded in what she assumed was a formal posture. "Attention, unidentified vessel." The alien spoke, its words translated in real time by ARIA. "I am Supreme Commander Vexthor of the Voraxian Empire. You have entered space claimed by our people. Prepare to be boarded and cataloged." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Typical. They saw the Firefly's size and assumed it was harmless. That mistake had cost plenty of overconfident adversaries in the past. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Firefly," she responded, keeping her voice level. "You are approaching human colonial space. Our territories are clearly marked in all galactic charts. I suggest you alter course." A sound emerged from the alien commander that Sarah's translator interpreted as laughter. "You dare to challenge the might of the Voraxian Armada with a single vessel, a vessel smaller than our shuttlecraft." "Size isn't everything, Commander Vexthor," Sarah replied, her fingers already programming combat solutions into the Firefly's targeting computer. "I'm giving you one chance to withdraw." The alien's scales shifted color, displaying what Sarah guessed was amusement or contempt. "Your courage is admirable, human, but misplaced. The Voraxian Empire does not withdraw. Prepare to witness true power." The transmission cut off, and Sarah's tactical display lit up with warning indicators as the massive alien fleet began to move into attack formation. They were arranging themselves in a sphere, likely intending to surround and capture the tiny human vessel. "ARI, battle stations, initialize quantum compression fields. Let's show them what humanity's smallest ship can really do." As the massive alien dreadnoughts closed in, their weapons charging and fighters launching, Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her. The Firefly might be small, but it carried humanity's greatest technological achievements within its hull. Size, as the Voraxians were about to learn, wasn't everything. The dance was about to begin. The art of being small. Quantum compression field stable at maximum power, ARIA reported as the Firefly's systems hummed to life. Adaptive defense grid online. All weapons primed. Sarah watched the massive Voraxian fleet through her holographic display, their capital ships moving with the ponderous grace of celestial bodies. Each one could have swallowed the Firefly 1,000 times over, their weapon batteries alone larger than her entire vessel. But Sarah knew better than most that raw size was often the enemy of innovation. "ARIA, initiate defense pattern Delta," she commanded, her fingers dancing across the neural interface. "Show me what they're packing." The A's response was immediate, projecting detailed scans of the approaching vessels. Voraxian technology appears to favor brute force over efficiency. Their primary weapons are antimatter cascade cannons, highly powerful, but with significant charge times. Shield systems are layered but rigid, detecting multiple blind spots in their sensor coverage. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Exactly what I expected. They built bigger, not better. She began programming a series of complex maneuvers into the Firefly's combat computer. Time to show them what quantum compression can really do. The Firefly's revolutionary drive system was humanity's greatest secret weapon. Instead of building massive engines and power plants, Earth's scientists had discovered a way to fold space itself, compressing the energy output of a small star into a vessel the size of a transport container. But the true genius lay in how that energy was used. "Multiple targeting locks detected," ARIA announced. "Voraxian vessels are charging primary weapons." "Let them," Sarah replied, her hand steady on the controls. "Initiate compression field modulators. Ready the phantom drive." The first salvo from the Voraxian fleet lit up space like artificial suns, antimatter beams powerful enough to shatter small moons lancing out toward the Firefly. But where the tiny human vessel had been, there was suddenly nothing but empty space. "Phantom drive engage," ARIA confirmed. "Quantum state uncertainty at maximum. We currently exist in 7 probable locations simultaneously." This was the true power of quantum compression technology. By folding space around itself, the Firefly could exist in multiple quantum states at once, making it virtually impossible to target. Each probable location was equally real until observed, a practical application of Schrödinger's famous thought experiment. Supreme Commander Vexthor's voice crackled through the comm system, his translator struggling to convey his frustration. "What trickery is this? No vessel can simply vanish." "Oh, we haven't vanished," Sarah responded, allowing herself a touch of smugness. We're exactly where we've always been. And everywhere else, too. To demonstrate her point, she triggered the Firefly's offensive systems. The quantum compression field that protected the ship could also be projected outward, creating localized distortions in spacetime. 7 identical energy beams lanced out from 7 different positions, each one striking a different point on the nearest Varaxian Dreadnought's shield grid. Shield impacts detected, HFY reported. Enemy vessel showing signs of systemic power fluctuations. Their rigid shield structure is attempting to compensate for quantum interference. That was the weakness Sarah had been counting on. The Varaxians had built their ships like fortresses, layering defense upon defense. But against quantum-level attacks, rigid structures were more vulnerability than protection. The Firefly's energy beams weren't trying to overpower the shields. They were introducing quantum uncertainty into the shield grid itself. Their shield generators are attempting to maintain quantum coherence, Sarah observed, watching the cascade of effects spread through the enemy vessel's systems. Calculate probability collapse point. Processing. The AI responded. Recommended target coordinates transmitted to weapons control. Sarah's fingers flew across the controls, orchestrating a symphony of quantum manipulation. The Firefly's 7 quantum states began to move in perfect synchronization, each projection weaving through the Varaxian fleet's formation like a needle through fabric. Where they passed, space itself seemed to ripple and twist. "What are you doing to my ships?" Vexthor demanded, his scales now shifting to colors that suggested alarm. "Teaching them a lesson in quantum mechanics," Sarah replied. "You built your vessels to dominate normal space. But the universe isn't just about what you can see, Commander. Reality is far more complex than that." As if to punctuate her point, the shields on 3 Varaxian vessels suddenly collapsed, their carefully maintained energy fields dissolving into quantum chaos. The massive ship's power grids fluctuated wildly as their systems tried to compensate for phenomena they were never designed to handle. "Impossible," Vexthor growled. "No weapon could penetrate our shields so easily. No ship your size could carry such power." "That's because we don't carry the power, Commander," Sarah explained, already programming her next attack run. "We borrow it from space itself. The smaller we made our ship, the more we could compress into it. Your engineers thought bigger. Ours thought deeper." The Firefly's quantum state projections converged on another target, its compressed energy fields twisting the very fabric of space around the Varaxian vessels. Size, Sarah knew, meant nothing when you could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The dance of David and Goliath had only just begun, and Sarah Chen was about to show the Varaxian Empire exactly why humanity had chosen to think small. Dancing with giants. "Launch all fighter squadrons." Supreme Commander Vexthor's order boomed through the command channel. "Surround that human vessel. No ship, no matter how advanced, can evade 1,000 targeting solutions at once." Sarah watched through the Firefly's quantum-enhanced sensors as waves of Varaxian fighters poured from their carrier ships, like angry insects from a disturbed hive. Each fighter was nearly as large as the Firefly itself, their conventional engines leaving bright trails across the void as they moved to encircle their position. Analysis of fighter capabilities. Varaxian fighters employ standard propulsion and targeting systems. Their weapons are scaled-down versions of their capital ship's antimatter cannons. They appear to rely on overwhelming numbers rather than individual combat effectiveness. Sarah nodded, already formulating a plan. Perfect. They're still thinking in traditional terms. Initiate quantum field dispersion, maximum range. Let's show them why that's a mistake. The space around the Firefly began to shimmer as its quantum compression field expanded outward. Unlike conventional shield technology, which created a barrier to deflect or absorb incoming fire, the quantum field worked by introducing uncertainty into the varied fabric of local spacetime. Enemy fighters entering effective weapons range, HFY reported, detecting multiple targeting locks. Execute defense pattern Echo 7. Sarah commanded. Phantom drive at full dispersion. The first wave of Voraxian fighters opened fire, their energy weapons creating a dazzling web of destruction that should have reduced any normal vessel to atoms. But the Firefly was no longer operating within normal physics. As the quantum field reached its maximum dispersion, the tiny human ship seemed to blur, its image splitting and multiplying like a reflection in a broken mirror. What sorcery is this? Vex Thor's voice carried equal parts rage and disbelief. My pilots report hitting your vessel dozens of times, yet you remain unharmed. That's because they're not hitting us at all, Commander, Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across her control interface. You can't hit what isn't there, or rather, what's everywhere at once. The Firefly's quantum state had spread across a sphere nearly a kilometer in diameter, creating thousands of probable locations where the ship might exist. Each location was equally real until observed, making it impossible for the Voraxian targeting systems to get a lock on any single position. But Sarah wasn't content to merely defend. Calculate probability convergence points for the fighter squadron formations. Let's show them how we deal with swarm tactics. Calculating, the AI responded. 15 optimal convergence points identified. Quantum resonance triggers prepared. Sarah smiled. The larger the number of fighters, the more predictable their overall movement became. Swarm tactics relied on coordinated action, which meant patterns, and patterns could be exploited. Execute quantum resonance strike. The Firefly's thousands of probable positions suddenly pulsed with energy. At 15 precise points throughout the fighter swarm, space itself seemed to hiccup. The quantum field collapsed in on itself at each location, creating microsecond bubbles of probability uncertainty. To the Voraxian pilots, it would have seemed as if reality itself had briefly stopped making sense. Fighters that had been flying in perfect formation suddenly found themselves occupying the same space as their squadron mates, their rigid shield systems attempting to occupy the same quantum states. The results were spectacular. Dozens of vessels spiraled out of control, their pilots struggling with instrumentation that reported them being in multiple places at once. Impossible. Vex Thor roared. No weapon can affect space itself in this manner. That's where you're wrong, Commander, Sarah replied, already programming her next attack sequence. We're not using weapons in the traditional sense. We're using the fundamental properties of the universe itself. Your fighters are trying to maintain position in space that we've made uncertain at the quantum level. It's like trying to stand still on shifting sand. To demonstrate her point, Sarah triggered another series of quantum resonance pulses. This time, the Firefly's probable positions collapsed in a rotating pattern, creating a spiral of spatial uncertainty that swept through the Voraxian formation like a cosmic ballet. Fighters that tried to maintain their course found themselves fighting against physics that no longer behaved according to their expectations. Status of enemy capital ships. Voraxian dreadnoughts are attempting to adjust their shield frequencies to counter our quantum interference. However, their systems are too rigid to adapt quickly enough. They remain vulnerable to targeted probability collapse. Sarah nodded, watching as the massive ships tried to maneuver into a better attack position. Their size, which the Voraxians had clearly thought would be their greatest advantage, was now working against them. It took time and enormous energy to shift the course of a 3-kilometer-long vessel, and time was something Sarah wasn't going to give them. Begin Phase 2, she ordered, her voice steady despite the exhilaration of battle. Let's show them what happens when you try to force quantum mechanics to play by conventional rules. The Firefly's quantum field began to pulse in a new pattern, its probable positions now moving in perfect synchronization. To an outside observer, it would have looked like 1,000 tiny ships performing an impossible dance through space, each one both real and unreal until the moment of interaction. The battle was far from over, but Sarah had already proven humanity's point. In space combat, bigger wasn't better. Better was better. Pride before the fall. Supreme Commander Vex Thor's scales had shifted to a deep purple, a sign of rage in his species that even the holographic transmission couldn't hide. His flagship, the 3-kilometer-long Pride of Vorax, hung in space, surrounded by the scattered remnants of his fighter squadrons. Nearly a third of his fleet's smaller vessels had been neutralized, not destroyed but rendered combat ineffective by the Firefly's impossible quantum manipulations. "You dare?" he snarled, all 4 eyes fixed on Sarah's image. "You dare to make a mockery of the mightiest fleet in the outer spiral." "Not making a mockery, Commander," Sarah replied calmly, even as she programmed another series of quantum field interactions. "Just demonstrating why humanity chose a different path. Your empire built bigger ships. We learned to work with the universe instead of trying to dominate it." "RIA," she whispered on a private channel. "Analysis of the flagship's power distribution. The Pride of Vorax is diverting significant energy to its forward shield grid," the AI responded. "Their engineering crews appear to be attempting to create a layered defense against our quantum interference. However, this is leaving their aft sections vulnerable to probability collapse." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Voraxians were fighting the last war, trying to adapt their conventional technologies to counter an entirely new paradigm of space combat. It was like trying to stop a quantum tunnel effect with a physical wall, fundamentally missing the point. "All ships, concentrate fire on that insolent speck," Vex Thor commanded, his voice carrying the edge of desperation that Sarah had been waiting for. "Full power to all weapon systems." "Commander," one of his bridge officers interrupted, "if we divert all power to weapons, our shields will be vulnerable to their quantum effects." I said fire. I will not be humiliated by a vessel smaller than my personal shuttle. Sarah watched as the massive Voraxian ships began to power up their main weapon systems. Energy readings spiked across her tactical display as antimatter reactors were pushed to their limits. The Voraxians were committing to an all-out assault, abandoning defense in favor of overwhelming offensive power. "They're making a mistake, aren't they, Aria?" "Affirmative, Commander. By concentrating their energy output in their weapon systems, they are creating large-scale quantum coherence that makes them more vulnerable to our interference patterns. They are, essentially, making our job easier." The space around the Voraxian fleet lit up like a new sun as dozens of antimatter beams lanced out toward the Firefly's position. The raw destructive power being unleashed would have been enough to crack a small moon. But power meant nothing when you couldn't hit your target. "Phantom drive to maximum dispersion," Sarah ordered. "Execute interference pattern Delta 9. The Firefly's quantum field expanded again, but this time with a purpose beyond mere evasion. As the thousands of probable positions of the tiny ship spread out through space, they began to interact with the coherent energy of the Voraxian weapon beams. The results were spectacular. The perfectly aligned antimatter beams began to twist and distort as their quantum states became uncertain. Energy that had been carefully contained and directed now found itself existing in multiple probable states simultaneously. The Voraxian weapons, designed to function with absolute precision, began to unravel at the quantum level. "No." Vex Thor's roar of frustration echoed through the command channel. "Impossible. Our weapons are the most powerful in known space." "Power isn't everything, Commander," Sarah replied, watching as the massive energy discharge dispersed harmlessly through her quantum field. "Your weapons are impressive, but they rely on precision and certainty. We've learned to embrace uncertainty instead." To demonstrate her point, Sarah triggered a synchronized collapse of the Firefly's probability field. The thousands of possible positions of her ship suddenly converged, not on a single point, but in a carefully calculated pattern that intersected with the Voraxian fleet's power distribution network. The quantum interference cascaded through their systems like a wave through water. One by one, the mighty dreadnoughts of the Voraxian fleet began to lose power. Their oversized reactors, pushed beyond safety limits by Vex Thor's desperate orders, were unable to maintain stability in the face of quantum uncertainty. Emergency systems activated across the fleet as antimatter containment fields fluctuated and weapon systems automatically shut down to prevent catastrophic failures. What? What have you done to my fleet? Vexthor's voice had lost its commanding edge, replaced by something closer to awe. Shown you the power of thinking differently, Sarah answered. Your ships are fine, Commander. We've simply introduced enough quantum uncertainty into their power systems to force a shutdown. They'll reset in a few hours, once the probability fields stabilize. Consider it a demonstration of what humanity could do if we actually wanted to destroy your fleet. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could almost see the calculations running through the Varaxian commander's mind as he realized the full implications of what had just happened. His mighty fleet, pride of the Varaxian Empire, had been effectively neutralized by a single ship smaller than his command shuttle. A new understanding. The silence on the command channel stretched for what felt like an eternity. Sarah kept the Firefly's quantum field active but stable, its probable positions now simply maintaining a protective screen around the vessel. Through her tactical display, she could see the Varaxian fleet's massive ships floating powerless, their emergency lights creating constellations in the void. Commander Chen, Vexthor finally spoke. His scales now shifted to a soft blue that ARIA's cultural database identified as a color of contemplation. I find myself at a loss. That's understandable, Sarah replied, keeping her tone professional but not unsympathetic. You're experiencing something few military commanders ever have to face, a complete paradigm shift in warfare. In my 3 decades of service, Vexthor said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, I have commanded fleets against a dozen different species. Always, the path to victory was clear. Build bigger, build stronger, overwhelm with superior force. But you humans have found a different way. Sarah nodded, beginning to power down some of the Firefly's more aggressive systems. We had to. When humanity first reached the stars, we quickly realized we couldn't compete in terms of raw industrial capacity or fleet size with the established spacefaring races, so we chose to innovate instead. Your quantum manipulation technology, Vexthor mused, it goes against everything we thought we knew about space combat. Our scientists claimed such precise control of probability fields was impossible. Not impossible, Sarah corrected, just difficult to conceptualize if you're thinking in conventional terms. The universe doesn't care about size or power in the way we imagine it does. At the quantum level, everything is about probability and interconnection. She gestured to her holographic displays, which now showed the status of the disabled Varaxian vessels. Your ships aren't damaged, just temporarily destabilized. Once their quantum states normalize, they'll be fully operational again. We designed our weapons to incapacitate rather than destroy because we understood something fundamental about space warfare. And what is that? Vexthor asked, his translator conveying genuine curiosity. That the goal shouldn't be to prove who's strongest, but to show who's smartest. Dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes. Dead enemies can't become allies. The Varaxian commander was quiet for a moment, his scales rippling with changing colors as he processed this. You could have destroyed us, he said finally. When our weapons were at full power and our shields were down, you could have collapsed our antimatter containment fields. It would have been spectacular. It would have been wasteful, Sarah countered. Your empire has centuries of experience in space travel, engineering knowledge that humanity could learn from. And now you have seen something new, something that could advance your own understanding of the universe. Destruction serves neither of us. Change serves both. And what change would you propose? Commander Chen of the tiny vessel that humbled the greatest fleet in the outer spiral. Sarah smiled. First, you withdraw your forces from human space. Then we talk. Really talk. About technology exchange, about cultural exchange, about finding ways to work together instead of against each other. The universe is vast, Commander Vexthor. There's room for many approaches to exploring it. The Varaxian's scales shifted to a color Sarah hadn't seen before, one that made his entire face glow with an inner light. "Your offer is most interesting. Our empire has always expanded through conquest, believing it the only way to prove our superiority. But perhaps there is wisdom in proving ourselves through advancement instead. The choice is yours," Sarah said, beginning to power up the Firefly's conventional drive systems. "In about 3 hours, your ships will regain full power. You can either leave human space and return as diplomats, or you can try your luck against our quantum technology again. Though I should warn you, the Firefly is just our prototype. Our newer ships are even more sophisticated." That wasn't entirely true. The Firefly was actually humanity's most advanced vessel, but Sarah figured a little strategic ambiguity couldn't hurt the negotiations. Vexthor's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "You are as clever with words as you are with quantum fields, Commander Chen. Very well. When our power returns, we will withdraw. And then we will talk." As the communication channel closed, Sarah let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "RIA, send a full report to Fleet Command. I think they'll be interested to know that the Firefly's first real combat test exceeded all expectations." "Already done, Commander," the eye replied. "Should I also note that you may have just initiated humanity's first peaceful first contact through superior military technology?" Sarah laughed, the tension of the battle finally releasing. "Make sure you include that we did it by thinking small. Sometimes the biggest changes come in the smallest packages." As she piloted the Firefly back toward the human colony it had protected, Sarah reflected on the day's events. They had faced down an invasion fleet with a ship smaller than a transport container, turned enemies into potential allies with a demonstration of human ingenuity, and possibly changed the course of interstellar relations. Not bad for the smallest ship in human space.